Alright guys, a lot of you are probably really curious about what's going on with the Pegasus update and what the details include. Look, I got a free daily box. So I'm just going to do a quick rundown and try to detail as much as I can in as little time as I can. So I got a quick list that I'm just going to go straight down and kind of point out, the pros and cons of each. The first and obviously the most talked about is the stat buffs for classes. Stat buffs are these nifty little buffs that give you your base stats an increase, and on the live server right now the amount of stat points increase is influenced by your charm amount. Now on Pegasus they've taken that off and they've rescaled it to where at a skill level of 5 all status buffs apply a plus 10 amount. It's just a flat amount. Now the benefit to this is that it prevents the stat to status conversion passives from being overpowered. For an example of like a stat to status conversion would be Sight of the Magi for mages. It gives you at max, at skill level 5, it'll give you 3 accuracy for 2 intelligence. And if you calculate that the maximum plus intelligence on the live server right now is about around 194, 196. I don't remember what it's at anymore, honestly. I don't play with stat buffers anymore. But if you take that, let's just say 190, and then divide that by, or no, excuse me, I don't remember the exact math on how to convert that one over. I think it's you divide 190 by 2, you get 80, multiply that by 1.5, you get somewhere like 120 accuracy. Yeah. Yeah, I think it is 120 accuracy. On top of this passive, which grants you 15% accuracy, and on top of this one, which grants you 10 accuracy plus 20, I think. And then, you would also have like your item mall, valor, accuracy passives. But for just being buffed, that's an incredibly strong effect, because not only can you be buffed for accuracy and buffed for concentration, which gives you accuracy, but now you're also being buffed for intelligence, which grants you even more accuracy. I haven't really detailed this one out before, but I'm pretty sure if you use Glorious on a very high intellect amount mage with all of the accuracy passives, and you use accuracy jewelry, that kind of stuff, I think you can ballpark around 4.5 thousand accuracy on a mage, and that doesn't include adding dodge down effects to your target. So needless to say, a mage could pretty much never miss if they really wanted to, but that might affect your damage. So yeah, lowering those stat buffs, it provides a benefit in one way by reducing the overpowered nature of them, but at the same time I feel like it's a little bit too sharp of a blow. I think that charm should still have an influence on it. I just don't think it should be anywhere near as high as it is now. I think at an optimum amount would be probably like plus 10 as a base, and then if you had like, I don't know, like 1,000 charm or something, it would give you an additional plus 10. Like, just because of the nature of these and just how strong they really are. I could detail that one out, and people are going to disagree with it because they just see it as a blind nerf for no reason, but there is, logistics and reasons behind why that's being so drastically cut down. Our next topic is the status up and status down effects. They were actually changed to a progressive percentage scale. In short, on the live server right now, if you had hailstorm, you would have, say, a 5% movement speed down, and then it would give an additional flat amount. It would be like 500 or 337 or some trivial flat number that it just takes it off regardless of your target's stats that it currently has. They moved these over on the status downs to all being percentage based, and what this allows these status downs to do is to take into account your target's base amounts. For example, if you, let's see if I can, let's pull up a quick little notepad here. Let's say you had a target with 5,000 defense, and then you had another one with 10,000 defense. If you had a 10% defense down on both of them, you're going to be taking off 500 off of this one, so you're going to be leaving yourself with 4,500 to fight against. And then if you took 10% off of this, you're going to be taking 1,000 off, so you're going to leave yourself with 9,000. So what it allows these new status downs to do is to scale up if the target has a high amount of that stat that you're taking off, or scale down so that way it doesn't completely break it. Because before, if we had the same totals, we would have something weird and wonky. Hold on. Say it was 10% and then an additional 500 for both of these. Now I'm making these numbers up. This is just for visual representation. What you'd end up here with is you would end up with 4,000 down, and then you would end up with 8,500. Now there are some status effects on the live server which don't have a percentage, like mana burn or something like that. So let's go ahead and refigure this. Let's say this is a lower level or a lower stat amount for something. Say it only has 1,500 of it, and this one had 3,000 of it. You're now taking off 500 off of this 1,500, leaving 1,000, which is about around a 1/3. It takes off 1/3 or 33.33%. And then off of this one, you're still going to be leaving 2,500, which is taking off, it's a 1/6, so you're going to take off 1/6 of that. And then percentage-wise, I'm no good at just converting percentages in my head. I know basic percentages, but you can see right here between this and this, even though it's the exact same status down amount, it drastically hits this target. Whereas with this one, it just kind of nudges it. And when you're talking for defense skills, 5,000, 10,000, this would be like a mid-level monster, and this would be like a boss. If you're only taking off, if you're taking a 1/3 off of this, but you're only taking a 6 off of this, it's almost not worth using anymore. So they kind of fixed it so that way it actually ramps up or down depending on your target, and those ultra high flat numbers no longer exist, whereas before they would completely break a target. And it did the same thing with status ups for buffs. If you had plus 1,500 health on any target you buff that on, and then you go and you run over to a level 1 visitor and they only have 120 health points, and then you all of a sudden you buff them for 1,500. I mean, that is a huge, overpoweringly god mode buff. That target will not die. I mean, it would take a significant, they would have to go fight a king with no other buffs, and they would probably still win. But even still, it would take something significant compared to their level to kill them. One of the situations that had been going on that not a lot of people knew about, I even tested it just to see if it was actually feasible, was to get those ultra high level buffs. Go buff a level 1 visitor that I had just made, put on, some modest gear, a couple max stat level 0 crafted items, and, like a +5 unique weapon. Got those buffs on it, and then I went from the starting point in Adventure Plans, I went straight up to Goblin Caves, and that very first room where you have the bats, the little goblins, and the goblin pongs, they're level 50 to 60 or so, and I could kill them without dying. And I mean, I'm talking massive amounts of experience. You go from like level 1 to 30 in just a couple minutes. And that just really accentuates the difference between what the buff is on the live system versus what it would be now. Because right now, all of the buffs are percentage based. So if you have a very low base, it's not going to provide as much of a buff. So it's really good for preventing game-breaking mechanics from occurring. The next topic is skill cooldowns. Across the board initially, when they first did it, and I threw a fit and made it very clear that it was not acceptable the way that it was, because it would require way too much balancing to occur again. It completely broke procced passives. For example, like, trying to get fire stacks on a mage, you only have a 35% chance to gain 1 stack of blaze on yourself, and you only had 9 fire spells in total. But these cooldowns were ridiculously high, and I mean just completely ridiculous. Like Fireball was up to like 22 seconds in cooldown. Excuse me. Even just your Fire Bolt was like 11 seconds or 8 seconds maybe. Excuse me, let me take a drink. Monster. The good stuff. Anyway, the cooldowns were preventing you from having a quick enough rotation to keep these effects alive, to keep them on you. And, so I pointed that out. I also pointed out a couple other factors that were really causing issues, like skill casting classes needing to drop so many passives to get enough active skills that they were actually losing damage both directions. It was completely redundant. Like, you try to get more skills so that way you can keep your damage going consistently, but you were losing so much damage or survivability or utility that it was making it completely impractical. Luckily, they changed it, because the original cooldown increase was anywhere between 100% to 300%, the original cooldowns, to now it's somewhere in the ballpark of 10% to 30% increase, which is normally about around a 1 to 4 second increase. Your very high cooldowns, like Blaze, for example, I think this one actually still needs to be corrected. We won't look at that one. We'll use Meteorite Flow. I think it increased by about around like 5, maybe 6 seconds in cooldown length. But either way, just having your one tree and then the couple off skills that you would normally get gives you enough casting that you can keep your damage active. So once that issue was corrected, it actually brought into play what the developers were really going for, which is, are you using your skills intelligently? Are you considering, what type of target you're hitting? Is it an appropriate time for you to use this spell? For example, I have Cold Snap. Now, I only have it at level 1. I could have increased it, but I like it where it is now because I just wanted it for the damage. And every once in a while, the movement speed down just to get a little bit far away from a boss in dungeons. However, you see a lot of people who will use this when they're in melee range. Like, you can hit them with your staff or whatever. And it was completely, like, unintuitive thing to do. Because as a mage, you want to stay away from from enemies, unless they're a ranged target too. Then, weirdly enough, you want to be very close to them, so that way you can use things like your Dispel and your Staff Stun if you have those types of effects, and then your self-targeted AoEs like Blaze or Frost Ring and stuff. But either way, if you were fighting a melee character, you want to keep them away from you. So you either want to prevent them from approaching you, or you want to prevent them from following you. And a lot of people were just kind of throwing this type of spell out there just for damage sake, just because they could. So increasing the cooldowns by 10% to 30%, sometimes 40 maybe, 40% maybe. It now kind of forces you to go, should I use this, or should I use something that does a little less damage and keep this utility? Same thing goes for stuns, for mutes, for like mana burn, sleep. It forces you to use those things intelligently instead of just throwing them out there and burning everything all at once. So it's kind of an interesting thing. Obviously we didn't need it, but I think it does add a little bit of complexity to the game, and I kind of like the challenge of playing a game intelligently. Okay, so on to the big update, the Element implementation update. Before, you would see like these little tags next to certain skills, where, for example, Inferno has a little tag next to it that says Fire. Now, that is an elemental association. It's supposed to tell you that this does fire damage. Same thing can go for like Tempest does wind damage, Frost Ring does water damage. I'll ignore that. I wanted to say something about water and ice because whatever. But anyway, and then your Elemental Bolt like does sorcery damage. What this does is there's now a rotating system. For example, if you are facing a target and they have like a ghost element as their defense, then you want to use something that's strong against ghost damage. An example of such would be Holy. You would want to use something with a Holy spell. For example, the Spear Champion's skill Longinus Strike does Holy damage. So that would be an incredibly effective skill to use. And using an effective skill like that increases your damage from your normal 100%, your full regular damage that you normally would have done, to 110%. So you get a 10% damage increase. And this applies after everything. The element system is applied after damage reductions, after critical damage, after skill power. It's the very final tribute. So when you're using a strong element and it says you're supposed to be doing 110% damage, you are doing that extra 10% damage no matter what. So it actually is a really strong thing to keep in mind. And this goes for PvP and PvM. For example, I'll run over here to the Valor shop and I'll kind of show you what we got, or what they have set up for us to test with. Didn't realize I didn't enchant my chest piece. That could have actually been preventing a lot of damage earlier when we were in dungeons. Anyway. Oh. Well, there's my problem. It's kind of funky right now because it's bugged. The enchantment that you have on your weapon is actually the enchantment that it gets applied to your defenses. Let's see if it shows it. It also, for some reason, doesn't like to show Holy. Yeah, see, it's not showing Holy. So we'll go ahead and we'll just grab one of these other scrolls. But anyway, when you're taking the elemental system into consideration, if you end up using an element that is ineffective on a target, you're gonna end up only doing 85% of damage. So you lose 15% of damage, which is a pretty heavy toll. I mean, it can really hurt you when you're not paying attention like that. Yeah, I grabbed the wrong one. These are really, really confusing right now. So yeah, I like the complexity that it adds to it. And it does actually affect PvP as well, because as you can see, I apparently did that twice. Alright, let me focus here for half a second so I make sure I get to the right one. Okay, this should work. Okay, cool. It's something that you want to take in consideration even for PvP, because as you can see on my attack power, it says that I deal ghost damage. So I'm going to be offensively inflicting ghost elemental damage on anything that doesn't have an element already assigned to it as a skill. Now, currently right now, if I remember the elemental flow right, you will have your weapon enchantment, or imbuement. By the way, I'm going to be calling these imbuments, or imbuing, just because you have enchantments for substats, and then you have imbuement for elements. I think we should make that distinction very clear. So you'd have your weapon imbuement, and then you would have ammo, if it applies to your class, and then you would have your skill, and then finally you would have... No, wait. Is that the end of the chain? Yeah, you would have your weapon imbuement, then your ammo, and then your skill. Skills will override every single element that comes before them in that chain. So if you have your weapon enchanted for ghost damage and you use a fire spell, it's going to be fire damage. However, if you use like dual scratch that doesn't have an element applied to it, then you will apply it as ghost damage. So that's something to keep in mind, because in PvP, people are going to be able to imbue their armor to certain elements. And it can be kind of a wild card for you to, keep in consideration for PvP. And same thing goes for dungeons. With the way it is right now, you might actually need one or two different sets depending on the dungeon that you're going into. And that would pretty much depend on the populace of that dungeon. Is there a lot of water? Then you don't want to use fire, because you're going to be doing 85% damage, and they're probably going to be hitting you for 110% damage. It can be disastrous if you end up using the wrong one consistently for a long time. So I think it's a challenge, and I willingly accept that challenge and that diversity and that complexity that it adds to the system. I like it, because when you use it properly, it feels so rewarding. Moving on to the next subject, there's only a couple issues that I can really point out. There's issues that are pre-existing from the live system that we have right now that I'm not really going to go over in this, because they don't apply to what's being tested. Right now, what's being tested is the change to the status up and status down effects. You know what? I completely forgot something. Let's see here. On your status down effects, you're going to have some that are set amounts. For example, Frost Ring always does 50% movement speed down. It doesn't matter how much intellect you have as a mage. It doesn't matter how much charm you have as a mage. It always does 50%. And then you could end up having other skills that do just a stat influence percentage down. For example, Tornado gives you a dodge down based on the amount of intellect you have and the amount of charm you have. And then you would also have other things that would have a base amount that's always consistently set to the same amount. For example, Hailstorm always has 5%. But then it has an additional percentage affixed to it that does scale up with your stats as well. So you want to take that into frame of mind when you're building your character's stats with what skills you're going to be using, consistently. For example, Glaciating Chill, always dodge down, as just the 35%. Same thing with Freezing Chill. So if you end up getting these two skills, the only thing that's going to be scaling up is your Ice Bolt. So if you're a high charm class, you might actually want to skip out on Frostbiter, Freezing Chill, and Glaciating Chill, because they're not going to scale up. You could go with other skills that do scale up with your charm and just leave these ones alone. So you're reaping both benefits. You're saving yourself skill points, and then you're also building into more skills that are going to benefit your build. Now, the only issue so far that I haven't figured out, I'm not sure what's going on with it, is some classes don't seem to be benefiting from their weapon enchantments. And by weapon enchantments, I mean when you hover over attack power and it says Ghost, the elements that Ghost is supposed to be strong against, you're still getting immune, and you're still getting low damage figures. So, for example, say I'm hitting a poison target with a melee attack. You know, your standard auto attack. And let's just be clear. With this, if I'm just normal attacking something, just swinging my staff, not casting any spells, for some reason, I'm getting like a damage penalty. Because if you use a basic attack, it doesn't have any elements and your weapon's not imbued, against a poison target like the spiders in Cave of Volveric, you're gonna do 85% damage. Well, even if I enchant my staff for, say, fire damage, which seems to be pretty darn impressive against those spiders and the poison element, I'm still getting immune, and that doesn't seem right. So it seems or feels to me that either the element on the weapon isn't working for certain skills, or isn't working on melee all the time, or like the weapon elements aren't working at all for changing over your basic damage to an elemental damage. I'm having a really hard time testing this just because I'm getting so many weird mixed numbers. Sometimes it feels like it's working, sometimes it doesn't. Procced, damage increases are changing my base damage amounts. Criticals are affecting the amount of damage I do. Skill power gaining effects. It's really hard to just test that feature alone consistently and find out where it's coming from. But that's the only issue so far. Now, they did add in Paragon gems. They seem to be really weird. As you can tell, there's a bunch of binary or whatever code in it. From my understanding, the premise of this is that it's a gem that you can purchase or farm or craft or something. I don't know how they're going to distribute these. But the idea is that it's a gem you purchase and then you can upgrade over time via some method that hasn't publicly been disclosed or detailed, whatever you want to call it. But I mean, there's no detail on these. I don't know how to increase this. I don't know, where they're gonna go. This one says ring, necklace, earring. I highly doubt that's gonna continue to be there. If it does, that'd be pretty sweet. But for now, it's kind of a wild card. It's a mystery little goodie in the game. And this is the only one that they put in just to see if it's working, which it doesn't seem to be working to me, but we'll go ahead and ignore that for now. So yeah, in the end, a lot of changes. If you're concerned about certain things, get on and test. If you want to get a feel for it, get on and test. If you want to put in your own input, get on and test before you do it, because there's some things that seem like they don't seem like a good idea, and then they end up playing out as a really good idea, like getting rid of those flat numbers on the status up and status downs. It seems like it takes away from it, but it really does improve the stability of the game, the progression of the game. So yeah, I mean, so far most of the issues have been fixed. It seems pretty stable for now, aside from getting the scroll listings fixed so it's more intuitive, and that one little bug with the elemental damage not really working, and then the Paragon gems being a mystery. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Hopefully I'll do another one of these soon. If enough changes happen, but if not, I could just continue with the standard forum post. So hope this helps you guys out, and I hope this helps players adjust to the new system. Until next time, thanks for tuning in.